Hello and welcome to the Rabid Atheist. I'm Ed Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any issues related to those issues. A hearty shout out to the Rabid Nation. Join the nation by hitting that subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button and your options for citizenship will be presented to you. Today, I'm kind of responding to a question and kind of a situation I suddenly realized I had on the channel. I've responded to the idea of near-death experiences before as part of an old video called The Rabid Ramble, where I used to take 2 or 3 topics that I didn't think would do a whole video on and just throw them together. But I've never really done a single video on near-death experiences, and I want something that if somebody asks me about them again, I can just put the link in and give them my explanation what I think about near-death experiences and why I don't find them convincing proof of a lot of things. But when we talk about near-death experiences, we're talking about people who come close to have a brush with death, go unconscious. Uh, they're often on the operating table or whatever where they die even, and they're clinically dead for a while and they come back. And so a near-death experience is, okay, what does that person experience during their time of death? And one of the things that usually often comes up is some sort of experience of the afterlife. I know a lot of people experience, the ones I've heard in my own ministry when I was still a minister were things like, I saw Jesus, I saw heaven, I saw hell. Other people will talk about, yeah, I actually went to Valhalla, or there are other people that will talk about paradise, or in case of Hindus, you'll have this reincarnative experience where they feel like they're either going into their next life or they're coming out of one. Uh, the fact of the matter is near-death experiences are very varied. And even if, like, you realize that these different stories are all over the place, a lot of people use this as a proof, say, of a disembodied mind. Like if a human being has a soul or a mind that can separate from all the other stuff that's going on, then you can also maybe the conjecture that maybe disembodied minds are a thing. So if God is a disembodied mind, then that's proof that that concept isn't exactly as wackadoodle or whatever as you think. So, okay, some people are just, this convinces them of a lot of other things that aren't necessarily related to the afterlife. Okay, so the idea of a soul separating from a body, for instance, is a big thing that's proven here to a lot of people. The whole near-death experience issue kind of brings this up, okay? What are these people experiencing? What are they doing? And for a lot of people, it becomes very convincing personal experience that there is an afterlife, that there is something, besides, the physical world, and so on and so forth. So what about it? What does the rabid atheist think about near-death experiences? Well, I'm an atheist, so obviously there's some things I don't believe in here. Well, NDEs, near-death experiences, have the same problem as all personal experiences. Number one, you can't transfer this experiences directly to another person to demonstrate to them that the experience is real. You can only tell about your experience, but you can't really transfer it to another person. And so the only value a personal experience really has is to the person that had the experience. Okay, and so it's subject to the same problems, as one. But the other question is often interpretation. It's interesting that near-death experiences are always put through the same kind of interpretive lens as any other spiritual experience. That the person comes to this conclusion that this is what this is and it can't be anything else. Okay, so you have this issue of, okay, infallibility, that the person really believes that their interpretation of their experience is infallible and it can't be anything else. Okay, and people who believe in near-death experiences that never necessarily experience them are also kind of, it's, reinforcing their predisposed bias. It's a confirmation bias kind of thing. If they hear a near-death experience story about somebody separating from their body, they may say, see, that's proof of a disembodied mind or a soul. But they already had that belief to begin with. They just look at it as this is confirmation of their own preconception bias. Okay, so it's not really like that at all. And we're also assuming, each person is assuming that their interpretation can't have any other alternative explanation. So that's the weaknesses of personal experiences in general. But here, very specifically, you're basically already have this confirmation bias at work. You're already working on, your own experiences being infallible, and it's your own experience. You can't transfer it. A second objection that I would have is that these experiences in particular, almost always reflect the culture the person is a part of or the pre-existent beliefs that already exist in the person. Every near-death experience I've heard of, for the most part in the United States, has been a Christian one, or or near to Christian, where the person, um, having heard about heaven and hell and Christianity all their life, whether they're a believer or not, they suddenly are transformed into heaven. They're standing in front of Jesus, which, interestingly enough, every time Jesus is described as the Western, European view of Jesus. He's white, blue-eyed, something to that effect. And it's kind of interesting that every time, you hear other near-death experiences from other places, it reflects that culture or the pre-existing beliefs of the person to begin with. So Hindus experience Hindu, things, and Islamic people experience their near-death experience as an Islamic thing. Now, sometimes there is crossover, and sometimes this becomes very convincing, so that the person, changes faith. But when you look at the person's heard about different afterlife stories, and so all of a sudden they have a different experience than what they think they would, and so they then began to gravitate to their new religion, thinking that near-death experience has brought them in. Now, the problem, of course, is this is all preconditioning. Okay, where a person can be preconditioned to think and believe certain things before they go through an experience. And so then when they go through some sort of experience, it pushes them toward that experience. Or if they have questions about their faith, they may find themselves in a different faith based on the near-death experience. As somebody who's a former Pentecostal preacher, I can tell you that you can get people to believe a lot of things when they're in a highly heightened emotional state. And this is particularly true with near-death experiences, which brings up my third objection. Neurology kind of tells us that when a person is going through a near-death experiences, there's a deep, chaos in the brain. It's a traumatic experience where the neurons are firing all over the place, doing all kinds of things, trying to preserve the life of the person. Okay, and in that state, you're going to have stuff that's very much like a dream state coupled with, being on drugs or whatever. There's this, you know, all over the place that the brain is doing. But the one thing that is for sure is that while the person is going through the experience, their thoughts are still connected to the brain. Okay, they're viewing something in a very dreamlike state, but the dream is still kind of happening inside their mind, inside their brain. And so it's not really good proof necessarily of separation of the body, but from the soul or mind or anything. The brain is going through a trauma, and so it's grasping at everything, pulling on everything, and trying to make some sense of the moment. Or just in a very traumatic state, becomes very dreamlike, drug-like things, because all the neurons in the brain are getting fired on until suddenly they slow down because you're dying, and then it seems like you're having a state. So the concept of time when you're going through this is completely bonkers. So when people say, "Oh, my soul left my body and I went to heaven" and things like that, that's a moment that they're still actually alive on the table, zapping through their brain, zapping through everything else. There's actually a lot of good neurological explanations for near-death experiences, but nobody ever talks about them when they bring up the subject. Um, and really, bottom line, there is no data to prove a disembodied mind, even with this. We just don't have a way, per se, to measure something that basically doesn't have an existence. And so when somebody says that their disembodied mind leaves their brain, the only proof they have of that is that statement. It's an assertion without evidence. The evidence of that would be we find some way to measure what a mind is and whether or not it can be separated from a brain, but we don't have that evidence. Everything we know about minds and brains seems to indicate that they're very, very connected, and we have no evidence of a disembodied mind outside of this. So the problems with near-death experiences are pretty legion, really. And a lot of people sit there and find them very convincing, but when you really sit back and think about them, well, of course, there's a lot of problems with them. In fact, so much so that I don't think that they constitute evidence at all. In fact, I'm fairly certain if we tried to prove an afterlife with them, they'd be thrown out of court as not very good evidence with no scientific basis. And so they kind of go into the category of woo for me. So that's kind of where I stand on near-death experiences. I'm doing this video today because it is an easy one to do for me, and I'm running on short on time. But also, I think this is going to find a, I get asked this question every once in a while, usually once every couple of months or so. And so having a video on file where I can just put the link in the description and move on is just going to be very helpful to me. So thanks for bearing with me on this one. As always, thanks for every like, share, and subscribe. You guys are great. The channel continues to grow, and I appreciate every bit of it. It's all due to you. And as always, remember to live your best life. You only get one go around, and then it's over. Don't waste your time, money, or talent, or treasure on religion and faith and woo, like near-death experiences, but rather spend your time giving yourself to yourself, your friends, your family, the people that you care for, and making this a better world. And thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.